The other aspect I wanted to talk about in terms of this embeddedness is our engagement with the wider teaching and learning community, because that's also been very important. So we've got our business partner model for liaising directly with the schools. But we also realised as well we needed to be as active as we possibly could within the teaching and learning community. Now, of course, many colleagues are very active doing that within the university, certainly perhaps in terms of their own interest, their own scholarship. Again, we're talking about something at a little bit more of a program institutional level. So these are some of the areas we've tried to um, sustain as in sessional in terms of our collaboration. Reading also loves a community of practice. So you can see there that there's a number now of communities of practice that we're involved in. And this has been quite a key area of collaboration for us. Um, our school, the Global Academy, we have a global study lounge, which is a brand, let's say, slightly separate to Insessional. I know that's maybe an uncomfortable word, but that's sort of what we're dealing with. And we run our workshops, some of our workshops, and we run our drop-ins within the lounge. The university also has an international student experience manager that we work very closely with. That's a non-academic role, and we work closely with that person as well. You can see the second point there, the Student Skills Development COP. So bringing together those groups that I mentioned before, like study advice, like careers, like the Disability Advisory Service. So Insessional now is represented in that COP, and that is very, very important for making sure that everybody, all of us, we feel like we are also working together as colleagues, and we're not competing with each other to support the students. We're all working together to support the students, and we don't need to be anxious about that. So yeah, that's kind of some of the wider teaching and learning networks that we try to nurture. This has been quite an interesting sort of area of collaboration and crossover for us. Um, we've got the academic English program, the Global Study Lounge, and then the role of the International Student Experience Manager. And sort of at the center of that, in a way, are the English Conversation Cafes, which are a collaboration between the Global Study Lounge, the director of the Global Study Lounge, and the International Student Experience Manager. Um, there's a nice crossover between the Global Study Lounge and the academic English program, because the director of the lounge is also an academic language and literacy liaison. So he's one of these in-sessional business partner liaison people that we've been talking about. And so he's been able to really help promote the use of that space to the wider university, sort of using his liaison role as well, and make sure that we're working closely with the International Student Experience Manager. So I think the kind of point that I wanted to make in all of this is that I think in sessional provision we tend to focus a lot, understandably, on collaboration with the disciplines and collaboration with subject lecturers. And I feel as if sometimes we see this as almost sort of the top of the hill, the most important thing that we're aspiring to. And it absolutely is very important. However, there are all sorts of, particularly at Reading, again, this is contextual, but at Reading, there are all sorts of other groups and people who are having a huge influence on how teaching and learning moves forward at the university, how students are encouraged to engage with things at the university. And that's often being done through a service lens, and we have to be prepared, I think, to engage with that as fully as we can as well. So this has been really, really key for us that we're kind of sitting at that crossover between an academic discipline, collaboration with the disciplines, but also people get nervous about the word support, but a support service. So yeah, a lot of stakeholders that we really need to engage with, because if those people don't understand what we're doing, we're not going to get traction with the schools either. Um, so that's been really key for us. Um, and a nice thing that's come out of this is we have built a much closer relationship with study advice to the point that we now run joint sessions with them. Um, we can have an ongoing uh, project that I've got that we've got as a team with the International Student Experience Manager at the moment around supporting students in labs. So there have been tangible benefits as well for students in terms of these collaborations. Another thing I thought it might be nice to think about is so if people, yeah, we could maybe try another breakout room here. Um, Thinking about what it actually means to be a liaison. So we had a little diversion there into our other teaching and learning activities, but going back to thinking about this role of the colleagues that we have who are liaising with departments, we're sort of coming to a point where we probably need to refresh our role description of this. So my questions really are, what what does it mean in practice to be a liaison? What are what does that actually mean? What are we doing? And also importantly, what skills and knowledge are required and how can this be developed? This is something that's very much on my mind at the moment because I have an awareness that as people join the team, as people take on these roles, that there's a lot that's expected, again, that's maybe a little bit hidden. And it's great to think about how we can develop those skills. You know, when we started this business partner model, it was people who were already doing the work, and we were sort of codifying the work of people who were already doing it. We're now going to get to the point, we're getting to the point where people are joining the team who perhaps haven't done this work before, and we need to be more explicit around that. So again, if I can pop a Padlet in the chat. Um, Great. And then I think maybe another sort of 7 or 8 minutes in breakout rooms. And again, this Padlet will last for a while. So if you'd like to add to it now or later. And yeah, just kind of having a little bit of a chat about the skills involved in liaison. That'd be great.
And it's back over to yourself, Sarah. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you to everybody for the contributions on the Padlet. That's really useful to see in terms of what people feel that it looks like in practice, what are the skills and knowledge required. Um, just to pick up on a few points of what it looks like in practice. Absolutely, people have mentioned this idea of the clear remit, the role description. That absolutely is key and is something that I know it's important for us to keep on top of as a management team. We can't, you know, it can't just be that we wrote this role description, you know, 3 or 4 years ago and that's it. It needs to be refreshed, revisited, because the role evolves as the institution evolves. Turning up to these extra events, being visible, that's another aspect that I think we could further develop. The kind of at the moment, the liaisons are quite colleague facing roles. We haven't really gone down the line of sort of saying to students, this is your liaison in the way that, for example, the library do. Difficult to know whether or not that would be useful because actually, for the students engaging with ESAP, who we really want them to be sort of focusing on is their module convener and their module lecturer and going to that module. is it useful for them to know who the liaison is? What would they be doing with that person? That's kind of something for us to think about. But certainly visibility. So Welcome Week is a very, very busy time for our liaisons as they go to I deal with all the central welcome, sort of representing the wider in sessional, and then colleagues are really busy going to all the other um, events. As we're coming up to the hour, I'll just sort of say at this point, I know some people are going to have to bob out for other things. We'll keep going because there's an extra sort of half hour on this session if people are able to stay. Great. If not, I'm sure you can catch up later on the recording. We've probably got about another maybe 20 minutes or so to go. Um, and then yeah, sharing and knowledge disseminating to the wider team. A lot of our liaisons are also module conveners on our pre-sessional program, and I think that crossover has been really key as well to developing our EAP provision and is something that was mentioned in our BAS accreditation report for the pre-sessional. Um, so yeah, that's some really useful points there for me as I come to sort of think about refreshing of the role. And then yeah, the kind of the skills and knowledge required, knowing what's expected in terms of the work, listening to what others are struggling with. Yeah, this kind of being able to go to departments with an open mind and listen to what they need, and also understanding the institutional goals and how we can help align with that work. And I think that's a really good point as well. We have to be talking about these things in a way that speaks to both the departments, but also to the wider university and their more sort of strategic-y, corporate-y sometimes speak, because otherwise we just can't get the kind of traction that we need. Sometimes those two things are not massively well aligned with each other. So we 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 need people who are able to move between that sort of disciplinary and institutional um, context. One of the really nice things about being a liaison, one of the really interesting things is you get to see really kind of closely the different departmental cultures around the university. And that's an interesting little sideline going to all these different boards of studies. A board of studies in history is quite different to a board of studies in food science, for example, very, very different sort of cultures, not necessarily to do with the discipline, perhaps to do with the people involved. So thank you for all your contributions to the Padlet, and hopefully you can continue having a look at those and contributing if you would like. I've also seen the contributions on the previous Padlet as well, some really nice points there that were picked up. So just going back now to the slides. So we were talking about our capacity building going forward. Um, so really just kind of thinking about our reflections, what's worked for us, to sort of a summary of the points I've made, and then if people um, would like to ask any questions as well. Um, the key thing, the point I hope I've made throughout this talk is the replication of existing models. So making use of existing networks, making use of frameworks that people understand within the institution. That's going to be different contextually everywhere. At Reading, we basically we saw the success that Study Advice had with their comms, with the relationship they had with schools and with the centre. And we thought, right, well, how can we basically replicate that without upsetting our study advice colleagues? Thinking really in terms of the relationship between the roles rather than between individuals. And again, this is key. I'm absolutely not trying to imply that we didn't have relationships before we had this model. We absolutely did, but they were probably more at a personal level. And then, of course, as we know, the danger is when the person leaves on either side, what happens to that relationship? Where does it go?